Morning, everybody. Thanks initially and especially for all your good work on Friday night. Family night, Peter DeVito, congratulations to you for organizing and launching that fundraiser, which will be something we continue, I hope, for years to come. That added a little bit of excitement, but mainly what added excitement was the good work of our athletic teams. And to them, especially as they were inspired by the crowds that surrounded them and went from one place to the other, I'm especially proud and glad that indeed we got the sweep. So congratulations. Well done. During the fall semester of senior year, boys in Class 1 have the responsibility of writing and presenting a pair of speeches. These talks serve as a capstone to the English department's public speaking program, which begins in Class 6 with a speech introducing a classmate to his peers and concludes with the wisdom speeches, given as the mid-year exam, which offer seniors an opportunity to deliver a valedictory speech on a topic and text of personal importance, connecting the content to a story encountered anywhere during a boy's years at the school. The first of these two senior year speeches centers on a topic of a student's choosing and can take the form of an informative, persuasive, or commemorative speech. It has been our tradition in recent years to hear from boys whose talks have been given special recognition by their peers. And today we will hear from Aiden D'Alessandro and Dror Coe, one who will focus on the ideal of being present and the other on the importance of considering the past. Would you please give them a warm welcome?
I still remember drilling the lines. I vigorously attempted different forms of emphasis and enunciation. I embodied different accents. I began with American English, then British, then Scottish, and finally back to American. I worked on gestures. I pumped my arms and then kept them still. I ran in place and then stopped to examine my surroundings. These were my preparations for the infamous fourth grade poem recital. I'd chosen Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken, which I perceived as a traveler's account of following a lesser-worn path. In many ways, I aligned myself with the poem's main character. At that time, I had just moved from New York City to Massachusetts. Everything, my environment and my people, had dramatically changed in what seemed like an instant. I had entered a new world and considered the move an adventure. Simply put, I felt a connection to that courageous wander. Given the opportunity to share wisdom, I immediately selected this Robert Frost classic. It was the obvious choice. I had a firm grasp of its lesson. And yet, after rereading these lines and reflecting for hours, I now realize I had it all wrong. So, today, let's discuss how my life experiences have reshaped my understanding of this poem. What was once a triumphant story of embracing the unknown became one of a man bound to the past by regret and denial. And I think, which I hope to demonstrate here, that there's wisdom ingrained in these four stanzas to which we ought to pay attention. Before we begin, however, I'd like to briefly recite The Road Not Taken to jog some memories, or perhaps make new ones. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I cannot travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. As I alluded to, my fourth grade self interpreted this text in a very positive light, and comfortable in such a strange and novel environment, identified myself with the poem's traveler as a form of comfort. Indeed, I adhered to his words in the final stanza, which I considered an exclamation of victory. He proudly declares, quote, "Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference," end quote. Of course, I wasn't delighted with the abrupt transition from my old life to a new one. I was misplaced. I was angry that I'd been removed from what I discerned as my natural habitat. In the blink of an eye, I was hundreds of miles from my home, from my friends, and from the places I'd forever loved. And so, whether I liked it or not, I was no longer on that path that felt normal. Instead, I was thrown onto the path I'd not yet known, the one that was grassy and wanted wear. As aforementioned, however, the traveler asserts in quote, "ages and ages hence, that taking the road less traveled by has made all the difference." In other words, he expresses gratitude for encountering whatever lay ahead on that mysterious trail. According to him, taking the less conventional road was worth it. So, as an idealistic fourth grader who sought refuge in the words of Robert Frost, I made the most of the confusing situation I was in. I embraced it. At each set of roads that quote-unquote diverged in a yellow wood, I chose the path I hadn't yet taken. More specifically, I wanted to formulate a new identity and not conform to the one I'd grown into while living in New York. I participated in the chorus and theater, tried new sports like basketball, and pushed myself to new heights in the classroom. Little by little, I wore down the road, making Massachusetts feel like home. That was my relationship with the road not taken 8 years ago. But now, as a high school senior realizing that life is complicated, I've discovered that this poem is also more complicated than it formerly appeared. Most readers, like my fourth grade self, interpret this poem as advice for us to pursue nonconformity and uniqueness. If you pay attention to Frost's language, however, you'll understand that it's most certainly not. Instead, it pertains to our tendency to get stuck in the past, fantasizing about changing decisions we've already made so that we wouldn't have to deal with their consequences. The wanderer settles on the less traveled road because he believes it to have a quote-unquote better claim. The raw condition of the trail entices him. And yet, while walking there, he begins to garner doubt. The certainty with which he made his decision splinters as he enters a state of inner dialogue. He thinks, quote, "though as at the passing there, people had worn them really about the same, and both that morning they equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black." So, in hindsight, he realizes that the road he selected is not superior to the one he's left behind. No one has recently followed either road, and so they are both unspoiled and alluring. Finally, he determines that he's chosen the wrong path, helplessly proclaiming that he'll, quote, "keep the other for another day." Here, he gets stuck in time. Rather than enjoying the remainder of his stroll and essentially moving on with his life, the traveler laments that he'll never be able to forget about that other road. Quote, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by." This is not a triumph, as I thought 8 years ago. It is grief. Somewhere in the distant future, he'll remember with a sigh of regret that in choosing the road less traveled by, he'd forsaken the more preferable one, the one that has earned the title of this poem, "The Road Not Taken." You're probably wondering how I came up with such a contrasting interpretation. In truth, I've just lived a little longer. Having obtained more autonomy since the fourth grade, I've been faced with many more decisions from which I've ultimately benefited, and decisions that I've come to rue. I now understand the traveler's plight in a way I couldn't when I was 10 years old. Let me show you why with an example. About 3 years ago, I made a decision that would bring about my rejection of something I once considered essential to my identity: baseball. I had to determine whether I wanted to be a pitcher or an infielder. And like Frost Wanderer, I chose the path that initially seemed the most appealing. I soon realized, however, that the career of a pitcher was demanding, requiring a multitude of odd exercises and causing severe shoulder pain. I achieved much, but was more gravely affected by my defeats. I was exhausted, constantly comparing myself to others, and losing the mental battle against pressure. I knew it was too late to turn back, but I craved the ability to erase time and go the other route. I hated the decision I made, and that frustration overpowered my love of the game. Submerged in my fantasy of having chosen the other road, being an infielder, I stopped caring about the road I was on. I was reluctant to practice and stopped progressing while my peers worked hard to develop their skills. Many surpassed me while I stayed put, and that quote made all the difference. I was so hung up on where I would have rather been that, like the traveler, I failed to embrace where I ended up. Indeed, my regret hindered me from moving forward. We've all made choices in our lives that we regret. Some of those choices are probably more substantial than a baseball position, but I believe the message remains the same. At the end of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, the protagonist, Nick Carraway, illustrates our predicament. Quote, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past," end quote. We squander so much of our lives obsessed with and hoping to undo our past decisions. As each of these choices has consequences, we often can't help but wonder how much better our lives would be if we'd chosen differently. In doing so, we prohibit ourselves from cherishing where those choices have taken us, wishing we'd gone elsewhere in life. Existing in such turmoil is impractical, unproductive, and worst of all, a waste of our most precious gift, time. Instead of working against the motion of time, we must allow ourselves to progress along with it. We must accept where we are and eventually who we are, because that's all we can do. Only when we've arrived at this acceptance and have taken ownership of our decisions, regardless of their effects, can we make the most of what we have in front of us. That way, we permit Fitzgerald's current to carry us onward. As I had done so, I found a new passion for pitching as I learned to cope with the challenges it brought. If the traveler had done so, I'm confident he would have discovered beauty in the past scenery and pleasure in the adventure it offered. If we all do so now, we can discover the satisfaction we seek just where we are, even if the yearning to be somewhere else has long kept it hidden. Thank you.
Picture this. It's your typical Monday night as an RL student. Beat down, fed up, and falling asleep in the study center, you're juggling an English paper and a math test while battling an 800-word Spanish composition. With the addition of sports or band practice, you won't have free time until the weekend. Distracted, you sit back in your chair and your mind wanders. Your friends from other schools get to hang out on weeknights. Their nightly homework doesn't take them all night. They get to show up to school each morning in sweatpants and a t-shirt, some even sipping coffee from the cafe in their lavish dining hall. It feels like they are living their childhood and you are not. The truth is, they still get into many of the same colleges, have access to similar opportunities, and may go on to lead similar lives. Slouched in your chair, resting your heavy forehead on the desk, you arrive at one of the defining struggles of the RL boy. What is the point of this grind? Why did I choose Roxbury Latin? In my 4 years here, I have struggled with these questions. The answer I have found is best illustrated by American author Ursula K. Le Guin in her short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. As you may know from English class, the story depicts the city of Omelas as a utopia. The citizens have everything they could ever want, although they are not hedonists. The narrator describes joyful parades, health and security, and even non-habit forming drugs. However, this happiness comes at the expense of one disturbing cost. In a basement under one of the buildings of Omelas, there's a small, dark, and dirty room where a young child is imprisoned. Malnourished and neglected, the miserable child begs to be let out. All the people of Omelas know it exists, and many have seen it. Although most people accept the child's torture as necessary for their happiness, the narrator explains that there are a select few who leave Omelas after being confronted by the unjust cost of their joy. The ones who walk away from Omelas presents the dichotomy between the courageous few and the complacent crowd. This dichotomy and the noble path of choosing courage over complacency are at the heart of RL's mission. In this speech, I will share my personal insights on RL in The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. I will reframe our day-to-day struggles with grades, pressure, and endless homework in the broader context of an important life choice that we face today. Although the privilege of our education gives us an advantage in the rat race for status and luxury, RL trains us to do what so few are willing to: sacrifice our personal gratification for fulfillment and the common good. To fully appreciate our place among the courageous few, we must first understand the role of the tranquil majority. Le Guin's description of the citizens of Omelas is not what one might expect. She does not minimize the quality of their character. The narrator emphasizes that the people of Omelas, quote, were not naive and happy children, though their children were in fact happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched, end quote. The citizens of this utopia are not stupid, nor are they ignorant of the price of their paradise. They understand the injustice of their position and have come to terms with it. The narrator concedes that many of Omelas' citizens are morally disgusted by the reality of their situation. They remark, quote, often the young people go home in tears or in a tearless rage when they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox. Their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality and to accept it, end quote. The passage suggests that the happy people of Omelas are not to be looked down upon from a moral high ground. They interpret their favored position as random and have come to conflate this randomness with justice. They were born lucky, and the child was not. Like the average person, the people of Omelas prioritize their own happiness and fulfill the role that society's rigged system has assigned them. Similarly, when affluent independent school graduates give precedence to financial profit above all else, they take the easiest option, playing to the advantage they were born into, and accepting social injustice as reality. This is not the kind of mindset that breeds social progress, a core tenet of RL's philosophy. One reason it is important for RL graduates to choose community service over self-service is that we are among the privileged few who have the means to do so. Not everyone has the educational opportunities or socioeconomic security to devote their life to service. Even fewer have the courage. In our time here, our struggle has taught us the courage to choose what is right over what is easy. Le Guin's story concludes with a heroic image. Quote, at times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go see the child does not go home to weep or rage, does not, in fact, go home at all. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. But they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas." End quote. The ones who walk away have not solved the injustice of Omelas. The narrator's inability to describe their destination reflects the elusive nature of a perfect society. While their destination is unclear, their resolve is not. These determined few perpetually imagine a better world and pursue it. This is the weighty responsibility that RL instills in its students. Using intensity and meticulous care, RL encourages its students to be the ones who walk away from Omelas, to reject the comfort of complacency, and pursue something new, finding meaning in our struggle, effort, and contribution to society. My experience at RL has taught me an invaluable lesson. Walk away from extravagance, luxury, and hollow status. Live a life of effort, struggle, and courage, and you will leave this world better than you found it. After all, our lives are short. Some of us, if we are lucky, have already lived around a quarter of them. In a 2018 address to the assembled student body, the late former headmaster, Mr. Tony Jarvis, questioned, quote, "I wonder if, in all the world, there's another room like this one, in which are gathered a group of people who are as talented and hardworking, as tough in the best sense, and as tender in the best sense, as gifted and as privileged as you are. You are few in number, but in history, in every single generation in all of history, it has always been the few. The few courageous individuals who changed the world. You are the few in your generation who can make all the difference. Why not decide now to do something great, something courageous, with your one and only earthly life?" End quote. The next time you find yourself hunched over your laptop in the study center, tired, frustrated, and discouraged, understand that we are learning how to do what is hard. We are learning to do this because when we inevitably encounter injustice, the tortured child of our society, we will be faced with the choice. Will we use our privilege to help ourselves, or will we use it to help others? Thank you.
Thank you to Aiden and Dror. Thanks to their teachers who prepared them so well. As you're going through it, I hope that all of you understand that these skills in speaking are essential to your effectiveness as adults, and that we're laying the groundwork for that every step of the way, even in the 6th year and ongoing. Hope you'll take that as seriously as you do anything else that you study. Thanks very much. Class 1.